Evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the Planning Board and valued community representatives, I welcome you all to this evening's assembly of the Saco Planning Board. As chairman, it is my privilege to convene this gathering dedicated to the thoughtful planning and development of our community. Today, we come together with a shared commitment to shaping the future of our city in a manner that reflects our values, respects our heritage, and fulfills the needs of our residents both now and in the future. Our agenda tonight contains important matters, each requiring our careful consideration, expertise, and collaboration. As we engage in our deliberations, let us remember the profound impact these decisions will have on all lives, keeping in mind we're residents like you. Together, we must embrace the responsibility entrusted to us by our community, working diligently and thoughtfully to chart a course that fosters growth, prosperity, and harmony. With that, I would like to call this meeting of the Tuesday, October 1st, 2024, Saco Planning Board to order. I look forward to the productive discussions and meaningful outcomes that lie ahead. With us this evening, myself, Matt Provenzel, the chairman of the board. To my left, Joyce Leary Clark, our vice chair, and to her left, board member Jeff Brucho, and to my right, board members Carrie Lynn Lane and Jim Moyer. With us this evening, as always, our city planner, Emily Cole Prescott, along with Lisa Harmon, and our city council liaison from Ward 5, Phil Hatch. Our first item on this evening's agenda are the approval of our minutes. We have September 16th draft site walk notes, along with September 17th site walk notes, and then September 17th draft meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, I'll move to approve the September 16th, 2024 draft site walk notes.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
I'll second.
Second by, excuse me, Joyce. Motion made and second to adopt the draft site walk notes for September 16th as presented. Any discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the September 17th draft site walk notes.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
I'll second.
Second by Joyce. Thank you. Any additional discussion on the motion to adopt the minutes as presented? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to adopt as presented.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the September 17th, 2024 draft meeting minutes.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
I'll second.
Second by Carrie Lynn. Any discussion on the motion to adopt the draft meeting minutes for September 17th? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Our next item on this evening's agenda is our public comment period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to come before the board and present any questions, comments, or concerns regarding planning in the city of Saco here. Any specific discussion on a particular item, please hold those thoughts until that item of the agenda is in turn. And with that, if anyone would like to speak, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, and we will collect those questions or thoughts and we can address them as appropriate thereafter. All All right, not seeing anyone from the public that would like to participate, we will continue with our agenda. As always, on our agenda this evening, we have our planning board public hearing guidelines. We have printed copies for those of you that would like to have a hard copy. Any questions, please let us know, of course. And with that, we will move to our first application review and public hearing this evening. This is item 6A, and this is for 75 Franklin Street. This is map 53, lot 107, and this is for the Saco Community Center splash pad and building addition. And this is presented by Goal Palmer, and this is a continued application review and public hearing for a site plan amendment for the installation of a 1,750 square foot splash pad and an 1,800 square foot addition to the existing maintenance building. And these improvements are within the medium density residential zoning district. You have anything to add, Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We scheduled this for a public hearing this evening. We also hosted the site walk earlier this evening, so the board members may want to debrief on that. We did receive responses from the applicant regarding the board's questions on design review, and we provided draft findings of fact and draft conditions for your reference. The last thing I'll put or note is that we, in the after the fact packet, you did receive a correspondence via email from Jessica Valette. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So briefly, as Emily mentioned, we did have a site walk on this item this afternoon, just a short bit ago. We had some good discussion. We had some questions that were answered and presented by board members, a few of which had specific questions towards some drainage, and I think those were answered appropriately for the board members. And with that, we have the applicant's representative here. If you would like to give us a brief presentation as well, an update.
Yep, I'm Ben Shaw, and I've been working with Ryan Summer, the Parks and Rec Department Director, on the improvements to the Saco Community Center. I think you gave a good description of the overview of the project, so I'll just give you a brief update on what's changed since the last meeting about a month ago. I think Emily touched on it. We have received comments or a response from the city engineer saying he did not have any comments. And we have received approval from the Water Resource Recovery Department to connect to their sewer from the splash pad. And we received a conditional, I guess you could call it, approval from Maine Water. Their condition is we're trying to connect to an existing water service stub. And they just want us to verify that it meets their specs before we hook the splash pad up to it. Last meeting, you asked for information on what the shed will look like that will house the pumping equipment. We provided a photo of that in your packet. And the last item was a comment was made during the last meeting that there was a wall pack light on the existing maintenance building, and we found out today that is in fact not a light, it's a camera. So I guess that's all I have.
Great, thank you, Ben. Board members, any questions for the applicant at this moment, or Emily or city staff?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we did mention a little bit about debriefing about the site walk. I guess I can start. I thought it was very helpful to get a very clear delineation of how much buffering exists from the neighborhood behind. And as he pointed out, we did notice that the light, which I had brought up, appeared to be a light in the plan, was actually a camera. I think it'd be important to possibly still keep that condition in there so they don't add a light that could possibly affect the neighbors. I did have a couple questions that hopefully we could kind of elaborate on. It was discussed, some concerns about the runoff from the slight increase of impervious area of the new building. And I try to limit my review and focus on that, right? I mean, it sounds like there could be some existing situations or conditions that not everyone's particularly happy with for runoff. And where they're not doing a huge site renovation, I don't know how much is within our scope, right? I mean, some of that's just there. We're decreasing some of the surface runoff by the installation of the splash pad because that will become captive and hold it, and then they can control it into the wastewater facility. And when you look at the outline on site today, existing paving is being taken out and only increased slightly, a couple hundred square feet of impervious area with the roof line. But kind of my question kind of came in is we were looking at the existing runoff drain, drip edge drain. And some of our reviews will have very clear drip edge filtering beds, which seem to have a little bit more retention and holding time. And I'm assuming that there is a area of roof treatment that triggers the installation of that versus just kind of a drip edge under drain. So I was just wondering at some point maybe we could get a little bit of clarification either from city engineer or city staff as to if this addition of the building would kick that building into needing that roof edge filtering system versus just kind of the drip edge. And if that would change any of the concerns about the amount of runoff that comes off the building as a whole. Other than that, I thought it was very helpful that the applicants touched base on the comment from the police department about concerns about maybe an errant vehicle making its way onto the splash pad. And I thought that there were some great ideas that were discussed on our site walk for devices that may not necessarily be a guardrail. It's something that could be very aesthetically pleasing, serve purposes of letting there be a very clear visual attractiveness. Hey, the splash pad's here, you're welcome, come to it. Could offer some seating. Granite blocks were mentioned, granite post, maybe a combination, which I thought was kind of good. So I'm looking forward to see what the applicant kind of gives us for a final buffering. And I just kind of extend my thoughts. I don't think the police were talking about specifically from the parking area. And in my opinion would be we might need to also include that a little bit on that circular drive if somebody were to come off that circular drive. And I don't know what the rest of the board feels. But those are kind of my thoughts. I thought the site walk was very helpful to let us know the buffering. Some neighbors brought up some very strong points about existing stormwater runoff. Saw the lighting. You know, I looked at the buffer because we're looking at it from both visual and noise. The trees have been trimmed quite a bit. I'm not sure what about the noise, and I'll guess when we do a public hearing, we might have the opportunity to hear from neighbors if there's concern about the noise. But I guess I kind of wonder what's the difference of the use of the playground that's currently now with the kids and monitoring versus a splash pad. I'll tell you, in my professional life, working at amusement parks, and you know, the noise from a splash pad or playground seems identical to me. The device itself, the moving of the water, doesn't really make that much noise in comparison to the excited children. So those are kind of my key points from the site walk, and I welcome to hear what other members had to say.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts from board members? Joyce?
Yeah, I guess I would just add, as far as not necessarily a fence, but granite markers, something to prevent cars going onto the lawn. I think the difference between the current use as a playground and the proposed use, as Ryan mentioned, was right now, during Saco Rec aftercare hours, the driveway is blocked off, but that won't be the case with the splash pad. So it does seem like if there are cars that are coming around the back of the building, then, you know, adding that extra protection along that lawn area makes sense and won't detract from the visual appeal of people being able to see that place and understand that it's open and available. I'm not as worried as much about the noise either because, well, some of the neighbors have already commented that they welcome the addition of the splash pad, but also, yeah, I don't see the difference between that and a playground. And we know there's not going to be lighting, so it's going to be limited to daylight hours and warm weather hours anyway.
Great. Thank you, Joyce. Any other thoughts from board members? Jim?
Mr. Chair, I'll echo those comments. I think that some of the ideas that were brought up at the sidewalk regarding protection for the children using the splash pad or even the playground, I think could be quite helpful. And the idea of the granite blocks, which seem to be relatively easy to place, but they accomplish their purpose by protecting whoever is playing. And that would also extend to that circular driveway, although I recognize the city needs to get their equipment in there to mow or whatever. But I think that would be sensible. I do also share your feelings that the audiovisual barrier that's already there would seem sufficient. You know, there may be more children playing if there's a splash pad, but you know, you could have 6 kids who are quite loud versus 10 kids who aren't. So I don't think that noise should be a problem with the addition of the splash pad. So I think that will work well, and I'm not concerned about the addition of the building because I think it's I'm sure the city engineer together with you know, all the other city staff can determine a way of making sure that the runoff from the top of that building doesn't create any larger problem than already exists there, because a good part of that area is already pavement. So, you know, there's not a lot of additional impervious area that's being created.
Thank you, Jim. Any other thoughts from board members? So I guess, Ben, could you maybe talk about the water shedding off the roof and, you know, that drip strip at the rear of the building and how it ties into the existing underground drain, that ties into some of the storm drains in the back of the building, and how it moves off-site opposed to, you know, a gutter system, let's say. I know Jeff talked about, and he asked about a filter system. Could you hit on those topics there for a moment?
Yeah, so the drip strip, it's a 3-foot wide, plus or minus, strip that lines the back of the building where all the flow from the roof will fall. And below that crushed stone is some filter media, so it actually provides some level of treatment. And below that, there's an under drain that will collect the water that drops off the roof. And that will be connected to an existing under drain. That is, I believe it starts or ends, however you look at it, at the existing side of the building. So we'll be connecting to that. And that ultimately flows to a structure down in the, planned southeast of the property. I can't remember the northerly direction off the top of my head, but it's southeast on the plans. Did that answer your question?
A little bit, but so that 3 foot wide area or so, is that to treat water? Is it to control flow? Why that system over just a gutter and a downspout tied into an underdrain, for example?
Yeah, it provides a level of treatment, and it also controls the rate of the flow going into the underdrain and ultimately downstream. Excuse me.
Okay, so in some instances, we see systems that stormwater goes into a specific system. I think that's what Jeff was maybe asking about, that treats the water. Is this a scenario where the amount of surface water from the roof is treatable through a drip strip system like that? Is that sort of
Sorry, didn't mean
yeah,
to interrupt
no,
you.
sure. No, that's okay. That's sort of why we're seeing a system like that, and to control the rate of flow into the system.
Exactly, yeah, and you take the area of the roof into consideration when you're designing that drip strip as far as the depth and the material that goes into it.
Okay. And then, as far as the area of the riprap at the rear of the building that's being, I guess, is the reconfigured, or I guess there's work to be performed there because of some of the underdrains and the rerouting through the area of the new building. But as far as that, once that work's performed, the performance of that area, the expectation, let's say if it's not performing at peak now, I mean, we would expect it to be performing perfectly, right? So is there, given the discussion we had on site today with some neighbors and some concern about drainage in that general area, that's sort of the start of the system and it being carried off-site. So is that, can you maybe touch upon that?
Yeah, so we'll be lowering that riprap bowl almost a foot to accommodate the storm drain altercations we're making in the parking lot. We will, once that's shaped, we'll put new riprap down, and I'm not entirely clear on what's causing the drainage issues with the abutters. But that lowering of the low point in that ditch could provide an option to re-excavate that ditch that runs along the property line and actually give that more of a slope. Again, I don't know what's causing the drainage issues, so I'm not sure if that's really warranted, but that's...
Sure. No, and I don't think that's, not looking for you to solve it here this moment, but I see that here. You've elaborated on it just like I asked. So we're given lowering that riprap bowl, as you put it, the inverts coming in and out all get lowered. So that gives us the opportunity to capture water more quickly and have more capacity in that area, or how does lowering it, what's achieved by lowering it in this instance, and not reconstructing it at the same elevation that it's at now?
Well, it might give it a little bit more capacity, but it won't increase or really decrease the rate that flow gets to it. The reason for the drop was because the depth of the drain coming from the splash pad into the storm drain system is lower than the elevation of the pipe that we were looking at today, that's taking flow from that riprap bowl and entering the enclosed system. So because of the splash pad drain, the storm drain system will be a little bit lower than it is today.
Okay. One other question, and it has to do with the communication that we received after the fact here. But the splash pad, I didn't see like an overall section through it to understand if there's a curb in it or whatnot. So the communication was asking about accessibility for that splash pad. Can you talk about that for a moment? How accessible is that splash pad?
You're talking about like slope and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we were on site, we talked about the overall elevation, not really, coming up a little bit, so we have the proper runoff and drainage into the structures and whatnot, but is there a 6-inch curb, a 1-foot curb to get from the ground, from the grass up into it? Is it accessible by someone with a wheelchair or mobility issues or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. No, it shouldn't have any curb. It'll be flush with the lawn. Yeah, there will not be any steps or anything like that.
Pretty flush, okay.
Yep.
And then circling back to the vehicle barrier, we talked about that as well. I think the board seemed pretty supportive of a natural barrier. We did talk about large stones or boulders or anything like that would be pretty nice. I think that's up to you and maybe Ryan there, but I think that's a positive note. Any other kind of circling back thoughts from board members? Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to touch base because there was a comment on site with regards to drainage, and we were talking about that existing riprap, and we know you have to move the structure and the kind of the collection point, which will be right behind the addition. There was a comment that was made, and it almost, to me, went against what I was thinking, normal flow. So when we're talking about direction of flow, everything that's coming in that existing riprap swale that runs from east, kind of west towards the back of the building into the larger collection area, which you're going to now lower and shift a little bit. That's collecting all the runoff of the existing playground, correct? And then it's going into the structure, the collection area, which you're going to deepen and repipe into another structure. Then it continues flowing underground at that point to kind of the west and exits the property like on the southwest corner, correct? Mm-hmm. So at one point, I may have just misheard it. I thought that there was indication that they felt like it was going out into that riprap drain, and that's where it was just seeping into the ground. We're not doing that because everything by flow is going into a piped system, correct? So once it gets behind the building and exit into that westernly corner, it's going into a storm drain system somewhere. It's not just percolating into the ground. It's finding its way into the city's storm sewer, correct?
Correct.
So some of the concerns that there were on site, I guess in your opinion, and I don't see a whole lot of topography that goes off site, but it looks like all of that existing playground area is making its way into that existing riprap swale, and at that point is now at a lower point than the abutting properties behind, so kind of to the south, and then it's gravity draining out. So we're not really looking at having the potential, even by changing the impervious area in the small amount that we're talking about, of that going to the neighbors. I mean, everything is flowing into a controlled system. You're just changing a little bit of the collection point, midpoint, where it's coming from riprap, open swale, into enclosed pipes. Am I correct, the flow direction?
Exactly. Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that was kind of my key thing. I want to make sure that I understood correctly, and all the other board members, that it's being collected and then piped into a fully enclosed pipe system. So when I hear that, and I hear how dry it's been, I don't know if I have a whole lot of concern about this making another problem on an adjacent property worse. I mean, that could be a design problem that was existing before the city's going to make any changes to this site. there's very little potential of impact of water coming off of this site and jumping over the swale and making it onto a budding property. So just wanted to make sure that I was clear, and we're all clear on directional flow of the existing stormwater. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So, yes, if this were a brand-new project, we see that area of riprap, water flows to it, and then to the northeast, there's a swale. It catches that northeast corner of the riprap, and then there's underdrain all there. So if there's a scenario that there needs to be some maintenance to that area to help make sure that surface water is captured and is flowing as designed, I think that's one conversation. But to your point, if there's still groundwater when we haven't had any rain events in quite a while, that's a separate scenario. Not saying doesn't need to be addressed in some fashion at some point, but not a result of work happening here. Sure. Jim?
Mr. Chair, to Jeff's point, looking at page 3 of the plans that were provided, it looks as if there's actually an 18-inch storm drain underground that runs from, I guess, there's a manhole there. An 18-inch storm drain runs behind the existing building, and then a 12-inch storm drain must also sort of run into that in a southeasterly direction. And then running southwest, there's another, it looks like, it's a little hard to read, but it looks like it's another 18-inch storm drain that goes into a property that says formerly Central Street, and then 18-inch storm drain goes, I guess, southwest further. So that's the storm drain system that Jeff was talking about, which should, if it's working, should take care of anything coming off the buildings or the site, it would seem to me.
I just want to make sure I know what storm drain you're talking about. You're talking about the 18-inch that's behind the existing maintenance building and runs parallel
Yes.
with the long side of the
Yep.
building? Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions or thoughts from board members?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I wanted to thank them. I think the pictures of the proposed maintenance building or pump structure was very helpful. I think it fit aesthetically very well in the space. My one question was, do you feel like it's large enough for what you're going to need for equipment in that space for your pumps and your filters and your sanitization equipment? Just kind of hate to have you come back if it wasn't 100% what you're thinking. Particularly, it looks like you had some injection pumps for sanitization and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just that's all been mapped out, that it all fit very comfortably?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mr. Chair, if there's no more board comment, I would move that we open the public hearing for 75 Franklin Street splash pad.
Thank you for the motion, Jeff.
Second.
Second by Jim. Any additional discussion on the motion to open the public hearing? Those in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to open the public hearing. If anyone is here this evening to speak on behalf of this agenda item, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, and we will collect questions as we proceed and address them at the end.
Hello, Brenda Pollock, past president of the Biddeford Saco Rotary Club. Thank you very much for entertaining us. This has been a project we have been working on for over 2 years, and we're very excited about the project. If you do have any questions, I do have my fellow Rotarians here who have very much been engaged, as well as Mr. Summers has been phenomenal to work with. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, seeing no other interest from the public to speak, I move to close the public hearing.
Thank you for the motion, Jeff.
Second.
Second by Joyce, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to close the public hearing. Back to board discussion. Any additional items that the board would wish to discuss?
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate to start looking at draft findings of fact.
Sure.
I'd ask everyone to take a look at the site plan review. It looks like we have some work to do to address items C, H, and T. C is compatibility with neighboring buildings. And I think the first two sentences of those findings of fact are sufficient, so we could strike the third sentence. With respect to item H, which is for off-site impacts, we need to determine that the proposed development does not have a significant detrimental effect on the use and peaceful enjoyment of abutting property as a result of noise, vibrations, fumes, odors, dust, or other cause. And I would suggest we include a sentence that indicates that the proposed splash pad is similar to the existing use of the property housing a playground, and that the extension of the building doesn't significantly change that use of the property or create any adverse effects to abutting properties. With respect to T, I think we should include a sentence that would say both the building extension and the splash pad have sufficient existing audio-visual buffers to minimize impacts on nearby properties. And if that meets with everyone's approval, I'll make that a motion.
And I would second it.
Well, then I will make it a motion. There we go.
I'll
Okay.
second.
All right, thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Joyce. As I'm trying to make some notes here.
Mr. Chair, may I repeat that back for the record?
That would be fantastic. That's exactly what I was going to do.
So I have Jim Mueller moves to review the findings of fact and alter them by striking through the last sentence on section C, compatibility with neighboring buildings, so that the first two sentences would be there, and the sentence to be struck would be the board can add any items to this section of the review after the site walk and hearing. And please tell me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that's right.
The next one would be relative to section H, off-site impacts. It would be to strike the board should make a finding on this item after site walk and hearing are complete, and to replace that with The proposed splash pad is similar to existing use of playground, and extension of the building does not significantly change that use of the property or create any adverse effects to abutting properties.
Yes.
And then the last one is T, audio-visual buffer, to replace the sentence, "The board should make a finding on this standard after the site walk and hearing," with both the building addition and splash pad have sufficient audio and visual buffers to minimize impacts on abutting properties.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Emily. Motion made by Jim and seconded by Joyce and clarified by Emily. Any additional discussion on those amendments to the findings of fact? Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We discussed a little bit at the site walk, and maybe our planner could give a little more depth here at the meeting, that we have some conditions that we may not be able to put as far as operational hours that we normally, or at least I would normally consider for protection of neighbors. Can we kind of expand on that, please?
If the applicant is agreeable, you really can add any condition, but usually when we talk about hours of operation, that's relevant to conditional use review, because we specifically ask for a review of hours of operation in the conditional use standards. So like the 20 Bayview application you just had before you, you did an hours restriction, because the hours are a specific item that you can review under those standards.
Thank you, Emily.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, if we could possibly ask the applicant, I think I understood today that the hours of operation were intended to be from 10 a.m. to no later than 7 p.m. If they would have any objection to us having a condition that is stated as a finding along with the operational dates. I think that's important for neighbor protection. And I don't know, we may want to go a little bit later if there happens to be a community fun day or something, but I think we need to be aware to protect the neighbors, that kids aren't out there at 9:30 in the summer when it's really hot and turning this thing on. It's just kind of my thought.
All right, thank you, Jeff.
If I may speak, Ryan Summer, Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Saco. I agree with Jeff. At the end of the day, really mostly splash pads operations are 10 to 7, but if we want to give us some leeway to go 10 to 8 during the peak seasons of June, July, and August, as the daylight stays a little later, that'd be something that, but again, for us, if we're operating the splash pad, we have staff there, because that's where the public bathrooms are, so for us, it would be the hour of operations of when the facility is open as well. For the most part, the facility, or the splash pad, we'll run 11 to 7, but if you want to give us some buffer, to go 10 to 8, no later than 8 p.m. and no earlier than 10 a.m., I'd be fine with that. Operation hours would be pretty much Memorial Day weekend to Columbus Day weekend. With that being said, it might close a little earlier because, again, it gets colder, but that's kind of, you take the shoulder seasons out. That's kind of what you're looking for is Memorial Day weekend or the week before Memorial Day weekend, last week of May to the second week of October.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joyce.
Oh, and thanks, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify, the equipment that we see in the renderings, that is removed
The only
at the
thing,
end of the season, so people aren't climbing around on it?
that's
or is
correct.
it
The only thing that won't be removed is in the rendering that you have is the circles. Those are built into the concrete. So those would be permanent. Everything else would be removed and stored probably out back behind the maintenance facility. Number one, to protect the apparatuses. Number two, to blow out the lines properly and all that.
Thank you. Did you have another thought, Jeff?
I do. I guess we didn't really talk on site. We spoke a little bit with the facilities director about cameras. I'm assuming you're planning, when you do the removal of the pavement and bringing your conduits out for the water supply and drain, are you bringing some conduits out so you can have cameras closer to the splash pad to keep an eye on it? Or at least put them in for future use in case vandalization becomes an issue and you have much
It will
better...
at least go to the shed that we're going to build, because that would be there. You have apparatuses that will be able to go to 3 or 4 angles off of that.
Yeah.
So that would probably be as far out, besides obviously the electrical line that you need for for the push button, for the, to turn the spray ground on and so forth.
Thank you. Ryan, you mentioned that caught my attention while the facility is open.
Yes,
So the splash pad would not be operational during the weekends?
we are moving to 7-day operations during the summertime. So we've brought staff on to run open court sessions, we run activities in there. The idea is that we will be a 7-day operation. We are a 7-day operation now, but we will have a dedicated more hours that would be built into the summertime. Again, we want to make sure this facility is used by the public. When we're not busy with programmatic programs in the sense of basketball stuff that we program out, we want people to come in, shoot around, enjoy the facility that we have now.
Okay, great. That's what I was hoping you would say.
Yeah, so there won't be a porta potty outside if that's what you're asking me. We would use the bathrooms in the facilities.
Sure. I just thought I thought it would have been a missed opportunity if it wasn't operational during the weekends,
Yeah,
if there wasn't
correct.
staff members there.
Yep.
But that's good to hear, so, okay. Any additional questions or thoughts or discussion from board members? So, again, motion by Jim and second by Joyce to, I guess, Jim, maybe one more clarifying question here. Was the motion to adopt the findings of facts with the amendments to C, H, and T? Or was the motion to
Well,
amend
I
C,
was,
H, and T first?
right, I was just going to get the findings of facts set. So the motion was to alter the findings of fact to read as, and then we can maybe perhaps approve the findings of fact with conditions of approval in the next motion.
Okay. So we have clarity there for board members. Motion by Jim, second by Joyce again, to modify findings of fact, items C, H, and T, as discussed and confirmed by Emily. We've had a few discussions here, one specifically about some hours of operation as a potential condition of approval, but as far as the findings of fact, any additional discussion on this motion? All right, those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to amend the findings of fact C, H, and T as discussed.
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, I think Jeff's points and the city seems to be on board with this, to add condition of approval number 11, again with the applicant's approval, to limit the hours of operation from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., and the time of operation from, with global warming, I'll say May 15th through October 15th. That should provide big enough window for the operation. So I would move to add that as condition of approval number 11.
Jim, would you consider maybe just increasing the AM hour from 10 a.m. to maybe 8 a.m.? So give them a little bit more of a window? So it would be 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.?
Did I say 10? I meant 8.
Okay.
I meant 8.
Thank you.
8 to 8.
I would second that.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Jeff. Any additional discussion on that motion? Motion is to add item 11, which would limit the hours of operation from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., May 15th through October 15th. Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to add that condition of approval.
Mr. Chair, I'll now move to approve both the findings of fact as amended and the conditions of approval as amended for the 75 Franklin Street application.
I'll second.
Everybody likes this one.
Motion made by Jim and second by Carrie Lynn. And that, I apologize, Jim, I was writing notes here. That was for findings of fact.
Findings of fact and conditions of approval.
Thank you. Any additional board member discussion on that motion? All right, those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to accept the findings of fact and conditions of approval as amended. And with that, if we could have one final all-encompassing motion.
Well, I'll just keep rolling, Mr. Chair. I'll move to grant the site plan application for the City of Saco for 75 Franklin Street for the construction of the 1,800 square foot maintenance building addition and the 1,750 square foot splash pad with associated site improvements.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Carrie Lynn. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, our next item on this evening's agenda is 969 Portland Road, map 63, lot 9. And this is for Hale Trailer, presented this evening by Sebago Technics. And this is a continued site plan review for proposed retail sales and service facility for Hale Trailer. Any additional items on that, Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have provided draft findings of fact and conditions of approval as requested at the last meeting. The applicant has responded to landscaping peer review comments, and we sent those along to our peer reviewer, and there are remaining comments to be addressed there. I know one of the items the board wanted was like all comments addressed for this, so I just wanted to flag that for you. The only other thing that I looked when looking through the application on Friday again, I noticed that we do not have an updated capacity to serve letter from Maine Water Company. So we do have one from 2022, but we don't have an updated one relative to the installation of the wash bays. I did reach out to Maine Water Company. They're not too concerned about it, but it is something that I just wanted to note for you. And I did ask the applicant to follow up as well on that and hopefully get a response before this meeting. So just two things to note that you might want to discuss with the applicant this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Emily from board members at this moment? All right, and with us this evening, we have Mr. Orr from Sebago Technics. Do you want to give us an update?
Sure thing. Good evening. My name is Matthew Orr, civil engineer with Sebago Technics. In front of you again this evening, we did revise the landscaping based on comments received during the last meeting, as Emily mentioned. Primarily, we bulked up the page right or the south side, as discussed at the meeting with you folks, to add more of a buffer between us and the neighboring property. And we did, along the northern boundary, supplement in some additional evergreen plantings along this side as well. So both sides are heavily planted with with evergreens, mixtures of firs and spruce, I believe some abrevieties as well. And I do have our landscape designer, Brian McMahon from my office, here with me this evening as well, if you do have further questions regarding landscaping specific items on this project. Regarding the reaching out to Maine Water, I did reach out. They did request the updated materials, which I sent along to them, and I hadn't received correspondence back prior to this evening, and I did reach out with another couple phone calls just to try and see where they were at and if they needed anything additional. But it seemed like they were just looking to get the updated plans and then redate their letter. And we did receive the latest response from R.S. Leonard regarding some comments. Primarily, they're concerning just the drip line edges and root protection zones within the detail on one of our plans. And then the other one was regarding buffering along the northwest property line. Again, this area is pretty heavily buffered already. It's actually, this area, if you recall, we weren't clearing out the existing vegetation along this area, and we're actually supplementing it with a lot of plantings. So we did remove a couple areas where we were previously had the privacy fence, but as Brian can speak to a little bit more if needed, the plantings that we're proposing once they do grow in are really, they're going to be taller than what that fence would have been. You know, that would have been limited at 6 feet in height. And it is aesthetically more pleasing for both parties on either side of a property line to look at a planting rather than, you know, fence paneling. And then I believe that's about it at this time for what has changed since when we were last here.
Great, thank you. Board members, any questions at this time for the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Jim.
I read the R.S. Leonard comments on the boundary growth that you're going to do, that it's going to take some time before that's going to actually come in and be sufficient to sort of buffer visually the parking area out back. Is it possible to continue the privacy fence for a certain number of years until that growth grows up? Or are you suggesting that we just get rid of the privacy fence and you know, the evergreens will grow fast enough and it's not really going to be an issue?
Yeah, I mean, our thoughts were just to simplify and keeping the site and construction being, you know, more uniform. Where we did have those areas of privacy fence, it was, you know, a couple like 100 feet segments across, you know, the whole property was a pretty small amount. But in regards to how quickly the trees would grow in, I'd lean to Brian to answer that question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian McMahon, landscape designer working with Matt on this project. I believe the installed heights for the proposed evergreen trees vary from 6 to 8 feet. And as far as a mature height, I mean, it could take anywhere from 10 to 20 years. But I'd say after 5 years, they're going to be over 10 to 15 feet tall. Or you could say probably 2 feet of growth each year in width and height. And as far as the spacing goes, if you put them any closer together, the trees are going to compete with one another. They're going to choke each other out, and it's actually in the long term, it's going to make a worse buffer.
So are you Are you suggesting just getting rid of the privacy fence altogether then? Because it's not really going to have a useful function after a year or two?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, if I may. Jim, I was kind of thinking something along that lines, and I caught up on our R.S. Leonard letter. It said additional buffering. The applicant has removed the privacy panels from the fence, which would help to enhance the buffering during tree establishment. So I'm assuming, right, that by removing that privacy barrier, you're allowing more light to get to the young trees. That's going to help them to kind of establish, take root, and then start their growing to hopefully hit that targeted, 2-foot growth per year.
Correct.
So it's kind of like you have to wait. It sounds like you have to wait a little while with the privacy fencing being gone to give it the light and resources that it needs, energy it needs to grow, and then let it mature from there. So, but I think I would tend to agree. It sounds like being patient and having a long-term better buffer is beneficial to all parties involved versus just having a privacy fence, from day one.
I would like to state too, I did a quick tally of how many evergreen trees are proposed along the northern and southern border, and we're looking at over 148 trees that we're going to be providing in the landscape plan. In addition to on the southern portion of the property, in addition to that buffer, the existing buffer that we are preserving along that edge.
Joyce?
Oh, just a quick clarification. You're talking about removing privacy panels. There's still going to be a fence all around,
Yes. There
for
still would be a-
security purposes.
Correct. And to add on to that too, where we had the privacy fence before, there were no plantings proposed. So now we're doing the plantings and not the fence. So it's not that we had them both and decided to remove just the privacy fence. It's we decided and could make the plantings work.
Create a natural buffer that, in addition to a security fence.
Correct.
Thank you. And just keep going for another second. In the privacy panels, we're talking about the green slats that go inside of the chain link fence. Right? That's what we had proposed.
Right.
Before.
It wasn't going to be anything super decorative.
Right. It wasn't another type of fence or anything like that. It was the inserts for the chain link fence.
Yeah.
So I'm in support of not doing those. I think that was one of my first comments during workshop. That wasn't my favorite, but great. You answered the questions from board members. Thank you. Any other board member thoughts?
Maybe you could answer the question. Now that you just sat down, Brian, the other comments that R.S. Leonard had about the tree protection measures, you're going to have to explain this to me when you're talking about installing a tree protection fence inside the drip line. What the heck is a tree protection fence?
Essentially, it's temporary fencing during construction that you establish around the perimeter of a tree, and you're not allowed to disturb that. And that's for the hope that, so trees have critical root zone, or their root zones essentially match the drip line of a tree. So if you have a 30-inch pine, it's not necessarily guaranteed that it has a 30-foot canopy, especially in a wooded buffer. In the existing natural state, it might have a 20-foot canopy at the top. So that means you'd have to establish a 20-foot perimeter around that tree to match the drip line. And in the comments, it is noted that we're not allowed, excuse me, to have any earthwork or fill inside the tree protection zones. We're not planning on doing that. The tree protection fencing is outside of our limits of grading and fill.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts or questions from board members?
Mr. Chair.
Jeff, yes.
Thank you. On a slightly different topic, I was reading through the findings and section O on hazardous materials. We're asked to kind of make a finding on hazardous materials, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory that what they're talking about is the daily operations of the repair facility, and that's clear. I didn't know if we might be able to come up with some wording that will discuss vehicles that are in for storage, for repair. I mean, does the applicant, is there a typical turnover period? Could we expect that maybe a placarded trailer hasn't been washed out? Is it going to be there like no longer than 1 week? Is there some sort of a timetable that we could put in there that might limit the possible exposure or risk to neighbors? So I guess, for example, there's a tank truck that delivers petroleum oil, gasoline. It's placarded, hasn't been washed out. It's there for some sort of emergency repairs. And can we have something that would give, enforcement department a limit, a reasonable limit, right? So you could be in operation, and yet we also don't have storage of 5 of these trailers for 7 months in the back lot. I guess, is there something that might be able to come to a middle ground on?
Yeah, my name's Dave Lockett. I'm with the Hale Trail. I've been here a few times. We have a strict policy on not allowing any dirty trailers, any hazmat carrying tankers, previously carrying tankers on our property. We just don't. We don't allow them. They have to bring it to us, cleaned out, and we sniff it out to make sure everything is gone it's a sniffing device.
So you would have no objection to helping craft some sort of language that would state that as a condition of approval?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that hopefully as a board we can kind of add one in just for a little protection of the environment and the neighbors. I think that would be beneficial, and it would make it look like we were very diligent in that evaluation of our criteria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts from board members? So Jeff, that was finding of fact, item O. And
No. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Yes, that was finding of fact O, but I think Joyce asked me a question too. I think conditions of approval is where I would intend to, make an amendment and have an additional line stating to that effect.
Sure, I'm trying to chase that condition down. There's
number 19 talks about hazardous waste encountered during demolition, but we're talking about operation.
Correct. So I guess I'm going to ping Emily. Emily, in that note on item O, it talks about a draft condition, talks about that. Are we talking the same language here on this hazardous materials portion? So we're section O, that specific item is not hazardous materials from trailers or contaminated trailers or anything the trailers have carried while on site, but this is specific to the site. Is that
So this is specific to any hazardous materials on the site anywhere, whether they come in from trailers or are stored on site specifically. So after the site walk, or at the site walk, you had asked Matt or to give you like some responses to questions, and one of the questions was, what is stored in the trailers? Is it hazardous materials? And then Matt's team presented a memo dated July 11th indicating there would be no hazardous storage of materials on site or in the trailers. So that is what I was referencing.
Sure, so I'm trying to chase down that condition.
And it's possible that we may need to re-add it here,
Okay.
because it might have just been a drafting error that it was dropped.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we didn't have any duplicate items.
I don't think so. I think we have to add it back in.
Okay.
Excuse me, doesn't the proposed condition of approval number 19, it does deal with the operation of the new facility. So wouldn't that include the concern that Jeff had?
Yes, actually, I do think that's what I was referencing is number 19. I don't think it was dropped.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yep.
No, that's okay. We just want to clarify.
I guess I am fine with condition number 19 as far as their daily operations. As a repair facility, there's certain standards that they're going to have for their solvents and whatnot, and their waste products. And I think that should stay because that's a key. It's common language we have for a lot of our commercial facilities. And I think it's broad enough that they'll be able to operate safely under that. I'm looking just to have an additional one that's specific to the vehicles that are in for repair, because it could be very unique that you have a licensed hauler whose trailer needs repair by the applicant's service, and that's still in their possession or their control, their equipment, but it's on his site. And he's just said that they will not accept them on their site for repair unless they've passed a clean-out test. I don't know what language we'll use, but I just think it's important that we have that as a separate condition of approval to protect neighbors and abutters. So I would be in favor, and I think he's willing to work with us to get the language right so we don't impede his business, but we have the effect of protecting the environment and the neighborhood. Specific to the vehicles that are in for repair, not his daily operations of a repair facility.
So Jeff, perhaps in addition to or continuing condition of approval 19, we could add no storage of hazardous material trailers, shall be stored on the property for longer than 10 business days or something like that. So if there's an extenuating circumstance where just a once in a while or something that is a little bit out of the control, then I mean that's sort of what you're getting at, what you're thinking, right? It's some sort of time frame that if there's a trailer or if there's a piece of equipment that needs to be repaired, and I know the applicants said they have standards, and that's fantastic, that's great.
So
there's once in a while scenarios that there's an emergency or something has to happen straight away, or I'm not sure how often people are passing through and they are going on a long trip or something has to happen immediately, but I think that's sort of what we're getting at. Maybe 10 days is enough, maybe it's not necessary, but I guess my point is that I like, if it's hazardous material related, I like it all within that one condition, I guess was my thought.
So, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we amend the draft conditions of approval number 19 to have additional text that says any vehicles or trailers that are in for repair shall be cleaned prior to repair or within 10 days of being delivered to this location. So my question is there a better word other than cleaned in your industry?
I think clean is, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I think clean would be, that's the term that we use. I'm also the safety director for Hale, so that's what we use. We only have one shop in Allentown that's certified to do tanks, and I think the tankers is where we have, they're hauling chemicals, they're hauling petroleum. We don't do those here in Portland, or I guess in our new building in Saco, but those would be the only hazardous trailers. I can imagine. The rest of it is sea containers and box trailers and flatbeds. We don't allow anybody to come in that has a full trailer of any type of hazardous material at all. So hopefully that helps.
So Jeff, was that a motion? Then I'll second it.
Thank you, Jeff. So we have a motion made by Jeff and seconded by Jim to amend number 19 of the conditions of approval to include any repair vehicles or trailers must be cleaned prior to the repair. And then you had some verbiage in there about removed in 10 days or shall be removed from the site within 10 days or should not be stored on site for longer than 10 days. Can you help clarify that last portion of that?
I think it was that all equipment and vehicles in for repair shall be cleaned, or for emergency repairs would be removed within 10 days.
Okay, thank you. Does that agree with your understanding, Jim?
Yes.
Emily?
Mr. Chair, I'm just curious how we will enforce that. You can certainly keep it on there and notice the applicant there. I just don't know how we would enforce it from the code office. And then I think it's any vehicles or trailers in for repair shall be cleaned prior to arrival at the site, right? Because we don't want them cleaned prior to repair at the site, because there will be wash bays, so we don't want to be taking any hazardous materials into the sewer system.
Correct, prior to arrival.
I don't know if that is okay with the applicants.
I think so, without speaking for him.
Absolutely, and again, I just want to say one more time that we don't work on anything that has hazardous chemicals on it, in it. Our people have to get in and work on these things, and I think I'd be the first to know, in my position, if there were any branches working on any type of hazardous trailers, other than the tankers, which again, they have to show up fully clean, and then when they're fully clean, again, we're not working on tankers here, but we do have a process for that in Allentown.
So, Mr. Chair, may I ask a question when it's appropriate?
Yes,
Because I know you're in discussion on your motion.
appropriate.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that is an option is to allow staff to work with the applicant as far as have the applicant draft up their operation management plan and then submit it into our records and have them sign it saying that they agree to it, which would be no hazardous storage of operations on site. And then that would allow us to have the operations plan with the water resource team and then with the planning team.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion. Thoughts on that, board members? Jeff?
Well, Mr. Chair, I want to amend my motion to include the verbiage that Ms. Prescott had about being cleaned prior to arrival, because I think that's very important. I also still feel it's very important that we have this in there at our level for protection of the neighborhoods. And I would think, or if we need to have them allow their operational plan for the Water Resource Recovery Department because of the wash bays being a different element, so they can have a full array of a scope of what's taking place. It doesn't seem like they're trying to intentionally hide anything. I'm just hoping that we could move this along. This particular item has been before us several times, and I think moving through this would be beneficial. And I respect that enforcement in any regard, whether it's in their operational plan or in a condition of our approval, would be difficult. But having it spelled out as a condition of approval is got a lot more bite if a neighbor should call up and say, hey, there's this trailer that I'm concerned about and it's been there for 22 days. It kind of takes out any question as far as compliance or code enforcement. If they go down there and the sniff test and it's a dirty trailer, there's no question that they're going to do something. But it sounds like they have as much concern about their safety of their staff as we do about the environment in the neighborhood. So I don't see any harm in having this condition of approval so that we can adopt the condition of approval and finding of facts this evening. So formally, I would amend my motion, if Jim will amend his second, to include the verbiage that the trucks or vehicles will be cleaned prior to arrival at this location for repair.
I'll amend my second to include that.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Motion amended with the verbiage of any repair of vehicles or trailers shall be cleaned prior to the arrival for repair. And we still have the portion, Jeff, of removal from 10 days if not cleaned. And are we including Jeff, in that motion, the facility operations manual within that, or is that a separate item to address, or is that separate as well, Emily? Jeff, your first thought?
I would be perfectly fine for your sense of keeping everything together, for that we would continue on, that, you know, vehicles that have not been, that arrive for emergency repair and have not been moved within 10 days, then we would go on further saying that the applicant shall work with the city staff and city staff to communicate and sign on an operational plan for both parties to agree to.
And I'll amend my second for that, too.
All right, thank you. Any additional discussion? Emily, I believe you have that captured. Any additional discussion on that item? All right, those in favor of amending item number 19 of the conditions of approval as discussed? Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, there are 3 items on the draft findings of fact that I think we need to adjust. So it would be items 6G, H, and T. So with respect to G, I would eliminate the last sentence which says the board should make a finding about the standard and insert a sentence that says that the applicant's proposed landscaping set forth in their site plan dated September 24th, 2024, meets this standard. With respect to H, I would eliminate the, again, the last sentence, which says the board should make a finding about this standard, and instead insert a sentence which reads, the applicant has provided sufficient landscaping to minimize off-site impacts as set forth in their site plan dated September 24th, 2024. Then with respect to T, I would eliminate the sentence which reads, the board should make a finding about the standard, and insert a sentence that says the proposed audio-visual buffer proposed by the applicant in their site plan set dated September 24th, 2024, provides an adequate audio-visual buffer. And I'll make that a motion to make those 3 changes to G, H, and T.
I will second.
Thank you for that motion, Jim, and the second, Jeff. Any additional discussion on the motion to amend findings of fact G, H, and T?
Mr. Chair, I would also remove another sentence in H that provides the applicant has provided comment response, which is under review, and note that the applicant updated its site plan on September 24th.
That's a very good point. I agree completely, and I'll amend my motion to delete that sentence as well in G.
I'll amend my second.
H, I'm sorry, H.
All right, thank you for that note, Joyce. Any additional discussion on the amended motion? All right, those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we approve the findings of fact as amended and the draft conditions of approval as amended for 969 Portland Road.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Joyce. Any additional discussion on the motion to adopt the findings of fact and conditions of approval as amended this evening? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll move to grant site plan approval for the Hale trailer brake and wheel proposal for 969 Portland Road.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
Second.
Second by Joyce, thank you. Any additional discussion on this item? Or this motion, excuse me? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item on this evening's agenda is Crescent Woods subdivision, which is off of Sam and Marshall Drive. And this is map 90, lot 22-1. And this is a continued application review and public hearing for final subdivision for a 9-lot residential subdivision in the West Residential Zoning District. Anything to add, Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have had some back and forth about the hydrogeologic assessment. That really was the only thing left that I'm aware of. And the applicant has proposed nitrogen removal systems as part of the subsurface wastewater disposal systems, mostly because the conditions have been so dry that they were not able to get the amount of groundwater monitored they were hoping for, although Thursday it rained, so I was hoping that there was some help, but it wasn't enough. So you'll hear from them, but that was the only item really left. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Emily. Any questions from board members for Emily at this moment? All right, and with us we have Drew this evening. Want to give us an update on that?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Drew Gagnon with Goral Palmer representing Crescent Properties LLC. As Emily introduced earlier, the only remaining item we had was the hydrogeological assessment. We addressed the remaining staff and peer review comments. So just a little bit more depth and background on how we got here. We submitted a hydrological assessment, and there was a peer review done that wanted some additional information and findings in the field to confirm the findings in the actual report. So we dug 3 test pits around the site to confirm and triangulate the groundwater levels. About 10 feet deep test pits that didn't have any water, so we ended up waiting a few weeks for some rain. That didn't happen. We moved the test pits a little bit further back into the outer portions of the property and dug them 15 to almost 20 feet deep. One test pit has groundwater levels in it. They were able to measure. The other two did not, and it's essentially just because it hasn't rained a lot in the last few months. It's been a very dry early fall. So given that, and given the presence of time and trying to get this project moving forward, we're proposing nitrogen removing aeration tanks on each septic system for the 9 lots in Crescent Woods subdivision. And the idea there is that when groundwater is eventually found, and again, it could either be later this fall or during the spring melt after winter, we'll eventually find the groundwater levels and hopefully confirm the results of the report. And then with a condition to be able to remove the nitrogen removing tanks from the septic system. So it's really just a timing thing, but we're taking essentially the risk that if that either the report can't be confirmed as we initially thought, or we just never get the groundwater levels, that the nitrogen removal systems would be placed on the lots. So essentially the city standard would be met, because that's just trying to meet the nitrogen levels at the groundwater source. I recognize it's probably a little confusing, so I'm happy to try my best with describing that further to the board. Other than that, seeking final subdivision approval tonight, and I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. One clarifying question. You're not suggesting that the nitrogen removing tanks are installed and then removed, but if you're at a point in construction and observing the site constraints, if they're installed, and then you learn, once they're installed, I guess is what we're talking about during the process. If you gather more information and they're not required, then they would not be installed.
Correct, and the idea here is the subdivision infrastructure will take some time to get going on, and by the time house construction occurs, and then septic systems are typically in the back third of house construction, at that time, we're hopeful we'll find groundwater in there and be able to confirm the reports. Yeah, so the idea is if they're installed, obviously at that point we've made the decision. The idea here is we don't believe they're necessary given this, but we understand we have to confirm through the city peer review, just confirm the report that our geologist came up with. So recognizing that, we don't want to put in these systems if they're unnecessary, just because they're an additional burden for a future homeowner and they're expensive. So between the two of that, we're essentially saying, well, we can meet the city standard either way. We're hopeful that they'll be just traditional septic systems once we find groundwater in the test pits.
Okay, great, thank you. Any additional questions for the applicant from board members?
Mr. Chair, actually there is one item that we may have dealt with it when we granted preliminary subdivision approval, but I remember reading in one of the past packets that there was a waiver being requested of a 5-foot esplanade for about 120 feet. Did we deal with that already? And if we didn't, is that still an issue that you need to have approved?
Correct, yeah, that 120 feet is just for basically right as you drive into the site along the road, we have to get a culvert in there to continue and maintain flow through there, and just the elevation of the road and the side slope tie-in, there's just not enough room in that right-of-way, and it's an existing right-of-way, so it's the one that was approved through the Samuel Marshall Drive subdivision, and we have a retaining wall on one side to try to shrink it in. But basically, there's just not enough room for the 5-foot esplanade there, so it's essentially just the tapers in down to that section and back is where we're requesting the waiver for that.
So we didn't already grant that waiver, right? Or did we? I don't know, that's an issue maybe our planner knows, or...
I don't believe it was granted.
All right, so at this point, at final subdivision review, it would seem like it still should be. We still need to grant it. So would that be something we would do in a condition of approval?
You can make a motion tonight, and then we will include it on the draft findings and conditions. And then any waiver to any subdivision standard has to go on the plan set as well.
So, Mr. Chair, would that be appropriate to do before or after we open and close the public hearing?
I guess I'd like input from the board, but I would say I'd like to wait and have public discussion first, but a few nods.
I agree.
Jeff agrees. Any other thoughts, questions from board members for the applicant? So with that, perhaps a motion. Joyce?
Mr. Chair, I move to open the public hearing.
All right, thank you for the motion, Joyce.
Second.
Second by Jeff, thank you. Any additional discussion on the motion to open public hearing? All right, those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to open the public hearing. If anyone is with us this evening to discuss or comment on this agenda item, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record, and we will collect comments and questions and then address them at the conclusion.
Mr. Chair, not seeing anyone coming forward, I'd move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Joyce, and the second, Jeff. Any additional discussion on the motion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to close the public hearing. Back to board discussion. Any questions or comments, concerns? Why don't we start with the nitrogen tanks that the applicant's proposing? Any thoughts from board members or concerns? Jeff?
I mean, they're giving a solution to not a known problem, I guess. Apparently, there's enough concern there from the peer review that they want to do the directional flow of this water level. And that's supposed to be a major concern of ours, right, is protecting groundwater sources. And this is one of the heavily developed areas of our community right now. And I mean, in some ways, it's a positive thing. They won't have water in their basements if they're down 15 feet and they don't have water, but they're also not on public water supply. So I don't know, is it a little premature? And I understand the pressure to want to get moving on a project, but you know, what are we tying the hands of our peer review by saying, okay, we'll grant approval, they'll use these nitrogen remediation devices, and there's still an issue. I don't know. I mean, this is one of those really technical areas that's why we pay our peer review for. And I don't know if I would be very comfortable moving forward, even though this has been presented to us. Maybe it's not the best solution if there is an issue. Hopefully there would be no issue. Because all these things, they're great, but they add a burden to, you know, home ownership. You know, it's the continuous maintenance. And, you know, we do lots of things in our community. There's residential sprinkler systems and, you know, this sort of equipment. It's ongoing additional cost to home ownership. I just think it's a little bit early, in my opinion, to overlook what could be a bigger health concern. We're trying to make the lots as small as possible, yielding, the biggest return. The water and septic systems are close together, and meeting the state minimum. I just have a little bit of concern to protect the citizens who buy these homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts from board members?
Well, Mr. Chair, there's an email dated September 24th from our peer review expert that indicates, if I'm reading it correctly, that the addition of those treatment tanks, along with later collection of groundwater data, would satisfy the additional data requests from the peer review. So I'm sensitive to what Jeff is saying, though, too. It's certainly, I'm sure, adding more and more equipment in any homeowner's house. Something breaks, it's more expensive. But for our job today, if it looks like our peer reviewer is satisfied, I think that meets the condition.
Thank you, Jim. Jeff?
I just tend to be, following, and I would agree if it said it satisfied all, but it says the proposed addition of the treatment tanks and collection of groundwater data after additional rainfall would satisfy many of the additional data requests. So I don't know what the other data requests that they are looking for are and how significant they are. It's just, I don't know. Just respectfully have a different view. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any additional thoughts from board members? Drew, could you maybe elaborate more on that? Are there any remaining items, questions, or concerns with those tanks? Does it answer all the questions? Does it meet all of the requirements with the city with those tanks alone? If you were to have proposed these tanks originally, would it meet and satisfy all the requirements of the city?
Yeah, so essentially if the initial report that was done, so we did a hydrogeological assessment, and it concluded from our geologists that it would meet the city of Saco standards. And then the peer reviewer said, generally agree, but you need to show with some test pits rather than just existing knowledge of the site and such, that they just wanted more defined information on, all right, the groundwater direction is going this way, as well as a permeability test of the soil to determine the gradient, which is these numbers you use to actually calculate how you get to where you're getting. So the testing of the soil, no issue. The groundwater map that the peer reviewer is requesting, not a problem. We just can't get that until we can get water in the test pits to then create the map. So we're chasing something that is simply just the last 2 months, we just haven't had enough rain. We know the groundwater is generally higher than that. We'd expect it about 8 feet below the ground. Some of the sewer test pits encountered groundwater. It's just a timing thing. It's just it happens to be a really dry fall. So our proposal of the nitrogen removal systems lower, basically, I think the FujiClean systems that were proposed in the response from the geologist reduce the nitrogen nitrate down to 10 milligrams per liter, which is the public water supply level. So getting that down to half, which is the city of Saco standard, needs to go down to 5 at the property lines. Should be no issue given everything that we know. So if the original hydrological assessment came back and say we had found groundwater and we did all these test pits and we couldn't meet the city of Saco standard, the solution would be to add these systems. So we're essentially just jumping forward to what's the solution if it is a concern. It's these systems that we'd be installing. Our hope is that we're going to confirm the report that was already done, so we don't have to install these systems. It's just a timing thing. That may not happen until next spring after the snow melt. It's very possible. I'm hopeful it's sooner than that, but we've been doing this for 2 months now and been getting these test pits, and it's just, we're waiting for rain, and that less than an inch we got on Thursday wasn't enough to show. So we're just looking for the 2 other test pits to triangulate position, and we're just, applicant's just running out of time with trying to get this started before it gets cold and trying to get this project off the ground. So if we have to delay this another 6 months to wait until we have, it's just continuous issues with delay in getting a project and getting much needed housing. So that's essentially what it is. I hope I answered your question with, just jumped forward to what the solution would be if there actually is an issue.
Thank you. That was going to be my follow-up question, is what's the solution when it's, when the report isn't confirmed? So, thank you. Any additional thoughts or questions from board members? Emily, can we jump to the Esplanade for a moment?
Yes.
So I'm jumping back to that sheet. So that's, as Drew's mentioned, that's within the right-of-way. Is that correct?
I believe so.
So if the board finds this adjustment acceptable and grants a waiver, does it inadvertently trigger an amendment to a previous site plan or anything like that? Does that cause any downstream effect on any other site plan approvals?
No, because all you're doing is refining the plan.
Okay.
So the final subdivision plan is what we're going to go off of.
Okay. Thank you. That was my only question on that specific item, but. Any other thoughts from board members?
Mr. Chair, and this is for the applicant, the 120 feet that you're looking for, the waiver for the 5-foot esplanade, is that the first 120 feet off of Samuel Marshall Drive? Would that be, I don't know how long that existing right-of-way is. If it looks like a 50-foot right-of-way, but I'm not sure.
Correct. So it's from station, if you're looking at the plan, it'd be station 2+10 to about 3+40. So right at the edge of right at station 3+50, there's a culvert that I was discussing. The rest of it is just grading concerns. We try not to grade onto the abutting property and also provide a drain outlet. So if you remember during our site walk, there was some low-lying area there. So we provided some drain inlets there along to collect the storm drain to improve the drainage in that location. So in order to do that, we need a little bit of room between the toe of slope where we're connecting to just have an inlet and a riprap apron and erosion control. So that's kind of all tied into that area. That's why it's longer than just that immediate culvert section area.
So the 120 feet, I'm just looking at one of the plans here, and I didn't find those markers that you mentioned, but the 120 feet starts at Samuel Marshall Drive and goes in towards your property, right? Well, but that distance, a 50-foot right-of-way, is actually 223 feet long.
So the reduction in the esplanade starts, I'm kind of just looking at the plan here, about 80 feet from where you'd enter from Samuel Marshall Drive. It's a 120-foot stretch from that point to basically where they'd enter the property, where the applicant's property is, that line there. That initial right-of-way is an approved right-of-way from Samuel Marshall Drive subdivision.
Okay, so it starts in about 80 feet from Samuel Marshall Drive, and so the 120 feet you're looking for with the elimination of the esplanade is from that 80-foot mark to your property, right? Into the applicant's property?
Yeah, generally in that area, yep.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chair, just to get the ball rolling, I'll move that we grant the waiver of the 5-foot esplanade for approximately 120 feet, beginning 80 feet in from the Samuel Marshall Drive towards the applicant's property line, if that's clear.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
I'll second.
Second by Joyce, thank you. So the motion before us is to grant a waiver of the 5-foot esplanade of approximately 120 feet, beginning approximately 80 feet in from Samuel Marshall Drive into the project property. Any additional discussion on that motion? All right, those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
A vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. So Emily, that would be a waiver that would be depicted on the site plan, on the final site plan that the board would sign, right?
Correct. And we'll also include it when we give you our draft findings and conditions.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other thoughts from board members? So Emily, it looks like next steps perhaps would be to get draft conditions of approval and findings of fact for the board to review.
Yes, we would have that ready for you at the next meeting.
For the October 17th meeting, potentially?
Yep, it's the 15th, but yes, we will
15th,
do that.
sorry. Yep, 10:15. Are there any additional concerns by board members or any conditions of approval that we'd like to preemptively discuss with Emily to have drafted? Or would we like to see that draft first?
Mr. Chair, there were several specific conditions we'll include from preliminary
Yes.
onto the final.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm hoping that maybe, I'm still on this issue, and I know we're waiting for a training with council or the city solicitor at some point, but, you know, oftentimes in our conditions of approval, we're very clear that we're approving something that meets all the ordinances of our town. And I still have a bit of heartburn about the moratorium of the pavement and when streets have been reconstructed and surfaced. And I know it's moved a little bit during our ZORS committee meetings or our ZORS process, but you know, in chapter 186 for streets and sidewalks, 186.32, it's to me very clear that they're not to be cut into for 5 years. And I know that the city's got a lot of movement to want to have development to meet these housing needs. But it doesn't say, it only says the only exemption is an emergency. And I guess who determines an emergency is relative, but I don't feel like the city council has declared a state of emergency of housing shortage that we're supposed to be pushing through. So it just makes it a little difficult for me people who have bought into Samuel Marshall Drive, they bought a new development, and now we're going to go ahead and let them cut in. I think at some point we need to be thinking, yeah, we have to have growth for our community, but we need to be maintaining the quality of life of our citizens. And I just am not an advocate, and I kind of feel like it's been indicated that it's not our purview because it's not in zoning or subdivision. So I'm hoping that we can possibly get a real conclusive opinion from the city solicitor. If are we violating that? It's an outstanding ordinance, and we're saying that as a condition of approval on every one of these, that it's not violating any of our zoning. And that's, in my opinion, very clearly in our zoning, and we should be weighing into it to protect our existing citizens of the city of Saco. So, you know, nothing else with the subdivision. I feel like it meets all of that. It's just timing-wise, with the acceptance and the repaving of Samuel Marshall and having to cut into it. I just would like to be more diligent of all the projects coming before us as we wait for resurfacing of our streets within our community, that we protect that for the full 5-year moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any additional thoughts or questions from board members? So on that item, Emily, is it possible to get a note from the city solicitor to provide a little bit of clarity on that? I know we've had the discussion that the Public Works can issue these and sort of they make that determination, but maybe just to make sure we understand and to answer some of Jeff's questions.
So you and I are meeting so Chair Provenzel and I are meeting this week to go over the list of items that we discussed at the last meeting and prioritizing those items, and this is one of those on that list. I was hoping to have a workshop with the Public Works Director, but he is leaving to go to another community. So we will discuss when the timing is to bring that up and bring it back to the board as part of that list, if that sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
I guess, Mr. Chair, respectfully, I would like it in a joint effort. Whoever the Director of Public Works is in that conversation. But I think the city solicitor needs to be interpreting the zoning that says that we are doing our job and we're not overstepping. And so that's what all 4 of you, are training, that it includes all of those members so that we're being fair to all the citizens of Saco.
Yes, and Mr. Chair, just to be clear, this is one of those things that we are going to vet out, whether it's a training or a memo or what exactly it looks like, and then return with the full list for you all. And I was hoping to get something on the record before this came before you tonight, but our city attorney is away until next week. So maybe by the time we have our draft findings, we can at least get some sort of opinion on the books for you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, with that, any final thoughts, questions, concerns?
Mr. Chair, I know we've talked a lot about this 5-year moratorium. I appreciated Jeff mentioning Section 186. I've been skimming it quickly to see if I can find a reference to the 5-year moratorium. I don't see it there. I've heard that many times though too, and I'm sure it's someplace in our codes, but I couldn't find it in Section 186. So if I might have been trying to read it too fast. I don't know.
I think you were, Jim. If you look at 186.32, and it gives all the description about the posting of the required posting and notification of street plans to repair them. It gives an extension policy, and it says, at the expiration of the time fixed and after such street has been reconstructed, no permit shall be granted to open such street for a period of 5 years unless an emergency condition exists or unless the necessity for making such installation could not reasonably have been foreseen at the time such notice was given.
No, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for pointing that out. I was looking for a number 5, and I didn't expect to be written out, so I wasn't focused on that. Although, just reading that sentence, I'd be very interested to see what our city attorney thinks of that, what that sentence means. But the or unless the necessity for making such installation could not have reasonably been foreseen at the time the notice was given, if they hadn't even come up with the application yet for the subdivision, they certainly couldn't have been able to open the street before they even came up with the project. But I know our city attorney will give us an opinion on it, and look forward to that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
So, Mr. Chair, with that, if it's timely, I'd move to continue hearing on this matter to October 15th.
Thank you for the motion, Joyce.
Second.
Second by Jim. Any additional discussion on the motion? So motion to continue this item to October 15th, where we will review draft findings of fact, draft conditions of approval, and hopefully have some opinion from the city solicitor on the pavement moratorium for additional discussion. Any additional discussion on the motion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could we take a short recess before the next item, please?
Sure, we can take a 5-minute recess. for that short recess. We will continue this evening with our next item on the agenda, item 6D. This is 872 Portland Road, map 60, lot 9, and map 61, lot 1-1. And this is for a new Volkswagen dealership with associated site improvements. This is presented by Saco Technics this evening. And this is a continued application review and public hearing for site plan and conditional use for the new Volkswagen dealership, and this is within the Portland Road zoning district. Do you have anything to add, Emily?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We did receive comment responses from the applicant back on September 16th. I just received the engineering review memo from the city today, and I sent that along to Henry, so he has not had an opportunity to respond. I just want to make sure it's not on Henry. So I think we'll have an update tonight, and then we'll be looking for those city engineer comments to be addressed as a final round of a comment response. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Emily at this moment? All right, with us this evening, we have Mr. Hess from Saco Technics. You want to give us an update here?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair and board, as well as Emily. Yeah, I believe last time we decided to table there at early September just to make sure we got a fairly thorough comment response back to staff as well as the board. I know Joe has been working and Emily have been working diligently to get plans reviewed quickly. As Emily stated, we did just receive that comment response this afternoon. Most of those comments certainly we'll move to address them swiftly. A lot of them provide a matter of clarification and a few items that we'll be able to clear up with some supplemental information to the city engineer as well as the landscape peer reviewer regarding some of the additional landscape additions as well. We'll certainly be working expeditiously to get that taken care of and responded to quickly. I will just bring to the board's attention as I attempt to try and work digital technology. Hey, look at that. Last we spoke, I believe in person, we had talked about the project moving forward and closing one of those curb cuts. With the revised plans that were submitted, you may have noticed that that curb cut has been closed at this time. We did submit the updated fire truck turning exhibits with the correct truck as well as that curb cut closed, making the circulation through the site for the fire truck, as well as through conversations with staff as well as the applicant and abutting property owner. Should some of those projects move forward in the future, we did provide something on record there that how that conceptually could work should the school and should that adjacent property go through development, how that entryway could be reworked at that time. So that's something that both the applicant had agreed upon at that point, and we were willing to submit as just kind of a conceptual site plan. But I guess with that, I'd turn it over to the board and let you know that we're certainly working to get final comments responded to as quickly as we can and get back in front of you guys for that final comment response.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the applicant from board members? I think that graphic, Henry, that you show with the conceptual site plan alternative, I think that's good. That helps give us that visual of understanding the discussions to date. As you mentioned, should any of that other development progress further. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Jeff.
Mr. Chair, if I'm correct, though, this is a conceptual idea, and there's nothing binding by the property owner at this time. It's just hopefully that we'll be able to, your site is basically knowing and willing and accommodating to make an entrance there and close off your previous one. But it would all be depending on you know, the board at that time and conditions of who's to develop that other parcel, correct? It's just conceptual.
Yep, yeah, it's, and through some conversation with staff, they'd had a few projects in the past where, knowing that there may be things happening in the future, they wanted to make sure that those things were just at least thought through and put forward as part of the application.
Thank you, I appreciate that very much, because that was one of concerns that I had. So I think that's great that it's at least a conceptual plan in the file. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It sort of big picture, it shows the alignment, some modifications to the parking, the addition of 2 parking islands, landscaped islands, removal of 6 parking spaces and their relocation towards the front. So I think that's good. It kind of clarifies the big picture, I think, for the board. I didn't have any additional concerns or questions myself.
A question for the board, if I could. Did the board receive any of staff comments today as part of their packet?
I'm sorry, through the chair, the city engineer comments, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got those today, so we did not put them in the day after the fact packet. They'll go to the next meeting.
No problem.
Okay. So we had a lot of comments, and I wanted to confirm as well. It was
No,
those
just
specific comments.
want to make sure if there were comments regarding those, that the board could certainly ask those today as well. But if they're not there, that's understandable.
Sure. No, I know you've been working diligently with staff and with the client, so it's much appreciated. Yeah.
I certainly can pull those up on the screen if the board wanted to take a quick look at the memo that Joe sent out. If you wanted to look at them, that's up to you.
These would be comments that, Henry, you yourself have just received or did
Just
receive
gone,
those
yeah,
today?
just today. And I recognize I just wanted to make sure if the board did see them, that we had opportunity to talk about them.
Sure.
Because they reflected anything. If not, that's fine too. They'll certainly be in a comment response that the board will see before the coming meeting. So that's not an issue.
Yeah, could we see those, Emily, just for our due diligence here, just while the applicant's here, and if anything jumps out at us?
Can you click your button, please, Henry?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you.
The answer to the first one is yes.
Yeah, most of these you'll see from demo plan and site plan, some of the grading plans, certainly providing some clarification. Utility plan for CC 104, just ensuring that we consult with Saco water, just to make sure the requirements for the oil water separator are met for the floor drains. At the time, I imagine through the building permit process, we'll be flushing that out as well. We had a few conflicts in our stormwater report relates to the stormwater management and the utility plan. It just looks like we had some clerical issues with putting the wrong number down for a rim and elevation in some of those. And we'll certainly be providing the information here for Joe's review.
I think one of the bigger ones here was the field topographic data. And obtaining that for the existing gutter line of Portland Road. And that was something that Joe specifically, I talked with him briefly today, and he specifically asked that that be done.
Yep. Understood. Yeah, that was something that we've actually got on our schedule to go out and take care of at this moment. Thank you, Emily.
I have consulted with the Saco WRD throughout the process, but we'll just make sure that they put something specific to the oil water separator into their written records.
Okay.
Joe did put in the recommended conditions of approval that relate mostly to long-term maintenance of the stormwater BMPs, such as the jellyfish, which is the proprietary system, making sure that There is a representative on site from that manufacturer as things get installed, items of that nature for most of those conditions.
All right, thank you. Any questions from board members? I know this is just sort of a brief cursory review here, but nothing.
Mr. Chair, I guess this would be for the applicant. How long would it take you to address those questions by the city engineer? Is it something that could be done in time for the next meeting in a couple weeks, or 1st of November, or? what do
My
you
goal is to have everything turned around within the next 2 weeks. I'd like to make sure that it's something that's reviewed by the city engineer prior to just trying to set the date for the next meeting, so that we're all, we can get comments and then be put on a meeting and make sure we're all kind of lined up for, you guys have had a chance to see it, engineers reviewed it, and we've been able to see it really before we sit back in a meeting.
So October 15th might be a little quick? Is that what you're saying?
If we turned things around in 2 weeks, I don't think it would give anybody enough time to look at it
All right, so like
before coming in front of you, unless the board would be comfortable with, at that time, coming before you with some drafts that the engineering comments are addressed as a condition of approval.
So the first meeting in November might make more sense?
Well, I would offer or ask the board if they're comfortable with that as a condition, because if that's the case, the 15 would work out just fine.
Short answer is I don't know, but how do the other board members feel?
I guess I would support a scenario where you and staff have an opportunity to correspond, work together, provide the necessary information to staff that satisfies the requirements for them to review, and then when it comes back to the board at the same time, have Emily a draft set of findings of facts and conditions of approval. I wouldn't find it necessary to see you on the 13th just to come back at the next meeting to review conditions of approval and finding of fact. I think it's to keep everyone's time efficient. I think if we can capture that all in one sitting, I think would be most appropriate. And if that's the November meeting, I think that's probably best. I think, as you know, the board is okay with making conditions of approval. We've seen you in the project. We know you're working through a lot of these items, but I think the opportunity to have one more meeting as necessary than dragging it out for two in the same time frame.
I appreciate that as well. I think that's a sound way to go about it, and I think it works well for us as well, and hopefully the board's time as well.
Yeah, I think the board is well coordinated and up to speed and satisfied, I think, for the most part, without speaking for everybody. But any other board member thoughts there? All right, so I guess if the board's in agreement, Emily, is there the first meeting in November, is that available if we were to schedule this item?
Yes, we can do November 12th or bump something on the 15th, on October 15th. This also is a public hearing. It's a continued public hearing this evening, too.
Yes. So I guess with the thought in mind, Emily, can we make a, if the board is in agreement, we make a motion to continue this application to the next, well, we're gonna have the same discussion. You like to schedule, put the date in the schedule, then say the next available one, that's, especially since it's a continued public hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, so you have a couple of options. You can continue the hearing and then close the hearing, but then you're on a timeline, but the applicant would have to agree to extension of the timeline. Or you can continue it to a date certain and maybe put a note in there allowing staff to move it out. So if you're going to do a date certain, do either October 15th or November 12th, provided all the comments are addressed or something.
So a few options there, but one, I guess one certain, if the board continues the application or continues this item and the public hearing to the first meeting in November, which was November 12th, you said? That would almost cover our bases, ensure we've met dates, timelines, and flexibility opposed to terminating and starting other timeframes. And I'm not sure if board members have other thoughts, but Jeff?
I'm fine, but where it was advertised as continued public hearing, should we at least go and open the public hearing, see if anybody wants to speak? Could it give them an opportunity to address any issues? And then I agree, let them try to come with one final plan, and we'll review it at that time. So with that, I would move to reopen the continued public hearing for 872 Portland Road.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Jeff. And the second, Carrie Lynn. Any discussion on the motion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to reopen the public hearing. If anyone is with us this evening to discuss this item, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. We'll collect questions, thoughts, and concerns and address them at the conclusion.
Mr. Chair, seeing no members of the public wishing to speak, I move to continue this public hearing until November 4th. And
Should be 12th.
I move to continue until November 12th. With the stipulation that all questions are resolved with staff, and if they need to, they can push that out to the next available date agreeable to the staff and applicant.
I think I second. Yes, I second.
Thank you for the motion, Jeff, and the second, Carrie Lynn. So the motion is to continue the public hearing to 11/12. Any additional discussion? So Jeff, this is a motion to continue the public hearing. Is it your intent that the motion also encompasses continuing application review to that same date as well?
Yes, sir. I thought that was kind of assumed. I just didn't want to close the public hearing, so we didn't kick off our timer of 30 days. And that gives staff and the applicant a chance to resolve the remaining issues, and then they can bring it back before us.
Great, thank you. Carrie Lynn, that's your understanding as well? Yes. Okay, thank you. Yes. So with that, with further discussion, is there any additional direction, questions, comments, concerns that we can provide the applicant that we're looking for?
I feel like all of the concerns are very technical in nature between the city engineer and the applicant, and maybe details with staff. So I think as far as our review, in my opinion, the applicant has satisfied all of my concerns and questions.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, I agree. I'd just like to see responses to the city engineer's comments.
Thank you, Joyce. All right. Those in favor of the motion to continue the public hearing and application review to November 12th? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Great, thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for your time and consideration.
All right, our next item on the agenda this evening is item 6E. And this is for Bradley Green's condominium development. This is map 67, lot 27. And this is a continued application review for preliminary subdivision, site plan, and conditional use review for 32 dwelling units within 16 duplex buildings within the medium-density residential zoning district. Anything to add, Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just pointing you to the after-the-fact packet, we did receive correspondence both from Willow's condominium secretary, but perhaps more relevant to this evening, an email from Chris Taylor, the project manager, asking that this item be tabled until the next available planning board meeting. So the motion here would be to table the application until the next available planning board meeting, and we will schedule it as staff when it's available, if that's okay with you. We're not under any hearing yet. It's just application completeness review.
Thank you, Emily. Board members, any questions for Emily?
Mr. Chair, I move to continue the application review for Bradley Street, map 67, lot 27, till the next available planning board meeting.
Great, thank you for the motion, Jeff.
I'll second.
Thank you for the Joyce. Thank you for the second, Joyce. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to table this item to the next available meeting. All right, our next item on the agenda this evening is 6 Cascade Road, map 63, lot 1-2. This is a application of completeness review and site plan review application for phase 2 of Aroma Joe's. This item here, I am going to recuse myself from and turn this item over to Joyce for review. Yes, sorry. So for clarity, I'm going to sit in the audience, and then I'll be back for the next item.
So Austin, would you like to give us a brief overview of this project for 6 Cascade Road?
I would love to, thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Austin Fagan. I'm here with BH2M representing Pine Tree Holdings, LLC. The applicant is seeking approval for the Phase 2 retail building on the Aroma Joe's site. This project was approved, the site plan was approved on May 7th of this year. As a condition of approval, it was required that the applicant come back to have the board review the architectural plans for the proposed retail space, shown on the plan as proposed building phase 2, I believe it is. The applicant has provided architectural elevations and plans along with a copy of the previously approved site plan. The applicant does not have an intended tenant at this point, but the building is proposed to be built in anticipation of having one. Relatively straightforward review here. No changes are proposed to the site plan, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
And Emily, I forgot to ask you if you had any comments or observations for us?
No, thank you. We have provided the design guidelines. As far as I'm aware, nothing is changing as far as the location or the general features relevant to the building, but certainly you can ask the applicant more questions about that. It seems like a light review, but it has changed substantially from the rendering we've seen, so.
Are there any comments or questions from board members? I see Jeff looks like he has something. I could be wrong.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple of things that I noticed. Obviously, it is a pretty light review. Looking at the conceptual building elevations, I had questions regarding the lighting, because there was no, well, the first issue was the lights on the building on the south elevation and the north elevation. It appears that there are some wall lights that are both up and down lights. And I'm just wondering how you're going to make that compliant with our good neighbor standards on zoning article 230-604B 13, where they're supposed to be, where non-residential and commercial are supposed to be full cutoffs. I can appreciate the architectural enhancement that you're trying to do with it. I just don't know how we can straight face it with our design criteria for the good neighbor standards. And the second thing is, I don't know if the board is going to want, it seemed like there was some lighting that would be provided underneath the canopies. The photometric plan obviously is not needed for the full site, in my opinion, because all of the area has been approved previously for parking and whatnot. But we do have some very specific standards for lighting under canopies, noted in 230-604B 11. Just for uniformity ratios. I don't know if it makes sense, in fairness, to at least have some photometrics for the area under the canopies. I tend to notice or pick on those. I think it's just fair for everyone to be providing the same information so that we can make sure that there's no varying contrast in the amount of lighting in there for trip hazards. And I think that's all I had. There was some note about screening, and is that screen for the mechanical systems? Looks like you're using a full fence on, so if we're looking from Portland Road, apparently there's one to the south and north, if you will. Each end of the building has mechanical screening with a wooden batten fence. So all of your mechanicals would be in there. There's nothing up on the roof as far as exposed air handling units or anything?
It is my understanding that it'll both be on the sides of the building, nothing on top.
Madam Chair, I think that's all I had for my review.
Any other planning board questions or comments, Jim?
The only comment I have is I think the building looks fabulous, and I love it. I appreciate Jeff's comments about the lighting, and I think those are well taken, but I'm sure you can address those. But the style and the look of the building will be fabulous, so
Thank you.
good job.
Appreciate that.
So this is an application completeness review hearing. If there aren't any other questions or comments, might be appropriate for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll move that we deem the application complete. The 6 Cascade Road for the Roma Joe's retail building.
I'll second.
Jim's moved, Carrie Lynn has seconded. Any comments? Jeff?
I guess that was just part of my concern, my initial assessment is I don't know, I mean, if you guys feel like you don't need a photometric for the canopy areas, that's fine. I just think that's usually one of the criteria that we're asking people to provide, and it wasn't provided. So even though this is a very light assessment, I don't view it as complete. So thank you.
Any other comments? Well, can take a vote on Jim's motion. Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
I'm going to vote no as well. I would like to see a lighting, more robust lighting plan. Emily, did you have something to add?
I just want to
Guidance for us.
caution the board that you can certainly ask the applicant to supplement the existing lighting plan, but they're already under an existing photometric plan. So you can certainly ask the applicant to amend it. Maybe there's an opportunity to like schedule the public hearing and ask for additional information and do application completeness and public hearing in one night. Because I just don't want to go outside of the scope of sticking to like the retail building, and the lights under the canopy are a good point, but there is already like a photometric plan for this site. So that's why we were thinking that is something that could come forward during that public hearing night, potentially.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, I move to find the application complete pending a follow-up submission of a photometric plan for the canopy areas of the building, and that be provided prior to a scheduled public hearing for 6 Cascade Road on November 12th, 2024.
Thanks for the motion, Jeff. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thanks for the second, Carrie Lynn. Any comments? Jim?
I'll vote yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. So the vote is 4-0 in support of Jeff's motion to find the application complete with the requirement for the additional photometric. Anything else? Would we like to move to schedule the public hearing for a particular date?
I think Jeff did in his motion.
So we're good to go?
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Anything else?
So,
Have a good night. Thank you.
So can I just ask for clarity on that? Because it sounds like, sorry, Matt, that you're, we just want to make sure that we are definitely scheduling the public hearing for November 12th.
yes, and I think
Okay.
probably it might have been a little bit vague, so I will make a motion that we schedule a public
Okay.
hearing now for 6 Cascade Road site plan amendment for November 12th.
I
Thank you.
second.
Thanks for the motion, Jeff, and the second, Carrie Lynn. So I wasn't the only one who was confused. All in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. So the public hearing is scheduled for November 12th. Welcome back, Matt. You were gone for so long.
Thank you, Joyce, for attending to that item.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before we move to the other items, I'll hand my seat off to Shannon if that's all right with the board. She's going to take you through the conditional use items.
Touche.
I'll be sitting right there, so I won't leave.
All right, our next item on the agenda this evening is item 6G. This is 66 Hill Street, map 52, lot 70. And this is a application of completeness review for conditional use for a home occupation for a single chair hair salon. Shannon, anything else to add on this one?
Thank you for your patience. I just needed to get myself set up. So things to know about this application is that approximately 252 square feet of the existing structure is being proposed to be converted for the proposed hair salon use. Ramuna Bulmer, who is the owner of the property, lives there and also is going to be the sole employee there. The intention is to have so there are two parking spaces on the property. One is to the right of the building and one is to the left of the building. To the left of the building is where people who are living there park, and to the right of the building is the proposed parking area for the clients of the hair salon. The only exterior changes that are being proposed is a walkway from the proposed parking area for clients to the back door where the salon access will be. So the back door is existing. A sign will be placed so that people know where to park on the property. And if you have any other questions, please let me know.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Do board members have any questions for Shannon at this moment? All right, and with us we have the applicant to give us a little.
Hi, I'm Ramuna Bulmer. So yeah, very basic, just would like to put a...
Ramona, do you mind speaking closer into the mic?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, much better,
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm Ramuna Bulmer. Thank you for hearing me out. And I just want to have a small little salon for myself. And I think Shannon explained it really, really well. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the applicant at this time? Jeff? Jim?
So I noticed I think the city engineer had picked up, is this currently like an unfinished shed that you will have, you know, the utilities brought into the electric, the plumbing, and
Exactly.
and utilize it? Obviously, the doorway is there, so we're looking at approximately 24 feet and 20 feet, so like 45 feet or so of walkway that's going to be created.
Yes.
And I look currently, there are no lighting fixtures on the building at all.
Outside?
Outside.
I have a motion solar light above the door at the moment.
Okay.
Above that like shed door.
And that rear door will be the primary entrance for?
Yes.
guests or clients.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just having a little bit of, what provisions will be unless the hours of operation will be at dusk. What do we have for some sort of pathway lighting? Is a thought of mine. Maybe when she's doing her upfit of the space, there could be an exterior light added by the doorway, and maybe one on the sidewall that could, just ensure illumination of the pathway. I think that's. Are we going to have some sort of signage on the building or something so they know that the salon entrance is in the back?
So whatever would be allowed, that's what I was going to have. Yes, so in the front, a signage on the front, and then I was hoping to be able to put it on my building, a sign showing where to go.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. Jim?
Hi.
Hi.
Regarding the parking on the side,
Yes.
I was looking at some of the pictures, and it looks like there's a driveway. It looks like someone else's driveway
Yes.
to the right of the building. And it also looks like right next to that, you also have paving to go. I guess that's how cars would get into the parking spaces?
Yes.
So would your customers need to use the neighboring driveway at all to be able to turn in, or would they be able to easily turn in from that paving right next to your house?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So if someone's parked in the paved area, yes, they would have to use a neighboring driveway.
And are the neighbors okay with that, letting you use their driveway for that purpose?
Have we been using it like that now for parking, and we never had an issue? So I didn't specifically ask if they would have an issue with my clients doing that.
Sure. I mean, I would certainly hope not, but it might be a good idea to check.
That's a good point. Yes, thank you.
That's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Jim, I guess probably touching on that, are you envisioning that the parking kind of drives in and then turns facing the building? That way she can have the two spots?
The pictures showed a car parked sort of parallel to the street, perpendicular to the building, as one of the two parking spots, and it does look like you could put two cars in there. The different diagrams show different widths of that sort of indent in the building. The city's assessor map shows it's like 20 feet
Correct.
wide.
Yeah.
So if they're going to pull in directly to have two parking spaces, then it seems to me, she would need permission from the neighbor to be able to pull in that way. If someone was just going to pull in straight, and if all you needed was one parking space, I don't know how many parking spaces you need for a use like this, but if you only needed one parking space, you certainly have it, just driving in straight ahead. But
Right.
I don't know if you can make that sharper turn just on the pavement right next to your building if you were.
Right. If it's an issue, I have an alternative parking spot on the other side of the building that the pathway would make on the other side to the door, so.
Sure, I'm not trying to discourage you at all.
Yeah.
But it looked like it was a little tight, and I was just trying to imagine myself driving in there, and I would think if you were going to park that way, the way that you proposed, you would need to get some permission from your neighbors.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any additional thoughts from board members?
I guess my only question was, is the driveway illuminated?
Yes, so where you saw the picture, the parking that was facing the building, like that parking spot, there's a motion solar light as well. So at the moment, that's what I have.
So there's a light at the driveway, and then there's a light
Above the door.
above the door. And you're planning on being open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., roughly?
Yes.
So
mean-
primarily daylight hours then?
Primarily, right, right.
Thank you, Joyce. Any other board member thoughts? The only questions I had were ones that Jeff and Jim have both touched upon. One was just making sure that there's appropriate amounts of light for safety back there. Cutoff would be appropriate. And then as well, understanding the parking area. I share Jim's thought, just ensuring that there's appropriate room. I do see the two drive aisles there. It does seem that, given the information we have here, that the parking spaces don't need to necessarily be perpendicular to the house. So you kind of come in and turn towards the house. If with you as the only employee, I suspect your scheduling is going to be in a sense that there isn't really one client waiting for another client. It's not that you have rotating chairs. I suspect you would have one chair and you would have an opportunity to finish a client and prepare for the next client. But it seems like there's room that you could almost pull in straight and kind of maneuver in and out. But I think maybe having a letter of support from your neighbor, I think would go a long way for the success here. But those were my only two thoughts right now and concerns. It was just ensuring the parking area was sufficient without conflict with the neighbors and some lighting. But those were my only thoughts right now. Jim?
Mr. Chair, I just have a question. Perhaps Shannon can help us with this. For a home occupation like this, is it necessary to have 2 parking spaces, or would 1 be sufficient?
Thank you for asking, Jim. I actually was going to try to flag you guys down. So a home occupation like this only requires 1 parking space. So Ramuna has provided 2, just to be on the safe side.
So if that's the case, thank you, Shannon. So if that's the case, then, I mean, certainly this application has 1 parking space on that side of the building, and with the neighbor's permission, perhaps 2. But if we only need 1, then I would think for application completeness, she certainly addressed the parking issue. And I'm going to go out on a limb here a little bit. I would think she might need some additional lighting based upon Jeff's comments. But I'm thinking for, again, application completeness purposes, she could study that further and just come up with, by the time of the public hearing, come up with a little more definite lighting plan for us. So with that as a long preface, I'll move that we determine that the application's complete.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
I'll second.
Motion by Jim to find the application complete, and second by Joyce. Any additional discussion? Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would just have a little question in the sense of, yes, the picture looks like everything would work on that right side of the building. I'm just looking, and I realize these overlays are not always that accurate, but if we looked on page 67 of our packet, looks like the assessor's map lot. It doesn't really look like there's a whole lot of real estate on the right side of that building that the applicant may own. It looks like the majority of that driveway is the neighboring driveway. And I don't know if we can be approving with the intent of parking on this side. And I realize that she's saying she has access on the other side, which might be a more viable spot. And I don't really want to get this into some blown out site plan survey. But part of that will be twofold. One, are we providing or giving permission for parking spots that are not on her parcel or doesn't have access to on her parcel? And then two, the lighting that she proposes, we have to make sure that we meet our good neighbor standards and the lighting doesn't cross that property boundary. And if that property boundary is 6 feet off of the building, that really changes the dynamics. So I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be much more appealing if she had a letter of support from the neighbor on that side, if it's going to be a shared use. Or is it better to have the design fully involved on the left side of the building, where we know that there's very little question of her right title and interest in the parking spots, and there's also much more buffer for whatever illumination she needs to put in. So I tend to agree that I think that, for the intent of the scope of this application, it's essentially complete, but we do need more information, and I'm just not really comfortable if we're going on the premise that the parking's on the right side of the building, that the applicant owns enough land there to meet that requirement for the parking. I guess that's what I have, and maybe Jim could give his view on that.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because the photos show, page 41 of that 86-page submission, show a paving right up to the building, right next to the building. And the next, on page 14 of 86, it shows a car parked perpendicular. It's off the other person's driveway, but I get Jeff's point that maybe just because it's off the driveway doesn't mean it's on her property.
So what I think is interesting is that there is a seam between those two pieces of asphalt where the grass is growing up. And if you look a little further down on page 47 of, on the bottom left, where I'm assuming would be street view, it doesn't, the grass comes back. It's like they're sharing the driveway. There's no curb cut, maybe. I'm not sure. I can't see enough detail, but which makes me feel like that city assessor's map is showing more detail than what was done here by this pavement addition. So.
Well, I agree. I noticed that too. And I think the city assessor's maps are helpful to us, although and no offense to any city assessor, but I think city assessor's maps are inherently unreliable when it comes to determining where property lines are. Now, the deed says the property is 74 feet wide on the street. I'd have to study this more to really know where, what is really her property and what is the neighbor's property. But I agree with Jeff that you know, certainly all that could be addressed if you just had the parking on the left-hand side of the building. That would be the easiest thing to do. And the last note I'll make is the city's tax map, that very nice map looking down and showing the lot lines. It does not show any of the pavement right next to her building, any place, on the right side of the building. So clearly it's an old photo that may or may not be accurate. So, but again, if there's any question as who owns that, you know, how far your house goes to the right-hand side, if there's any question about that, the cleanest way of fixing it would be Jeff's solution, which is have the parking on the other side of the building.
Okay.
Although I appreciate how that competes with your own parking there.
Right. So if I get permission from the neighbors, would that solve the issue or no? Would you still rather do the left side parking?
For my purposes, I would think if the neighbor agrees, I think that addresses the issue. But neighbors change sometimes. So you just have to think about that.
Okay.
So would it be something more solid, and I think it'd be much easier if the neighbor just said, yeah, I agree, but would it be more solid if there was an easement, a limited use easement for this purpose, for this applicant, that would give us some solid standing saying that, yes, we're allowing the parking on that side, and yes, she now has right to use it, correct? That would be my thought.
That's absolutely right. I think that would be the way to do it. I mean, I don't want to put this applicant through lots of expense of that, but clearly that would fix the problem.
Right, because that way the access and the parking don't change if your neighbor sells and someone else comes in. The new buyer would be bound by that easement.
Okay.
And it doesn't seem like a real burden to the neighbor for a car to be parked next to your house.
Okay.
Shannon, is in the application here, I'm trying to find quickly, I thought I had saw a note on it. Is there a note or a reference to any lighting? I know Jeff asked the question, but is there a specific response to the lighting in the application material here that I'm having a hard time tracking down? Oh, there it is, lighting details. It's page 4. Thank you.
I almost got there.
Page 4 of 86 there. No new lights will be added. Solar motion lights currently in place on the salon structure will remain in place. Exterior lights will be shut off once normal business hours of 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. are concluded. So where am I going with this? So we've done this in the past, right? But we have lights have been addressed. Parking's been addressed. I think we have questions on both. Shannon confirmed only one parking space is required. I guess just the way I see this, where it looks like we're looking for a little bit more clarity on the lighting, maybe the location, confirm the location for the entrance door and maybe some of that parking area. And since only one parking space is required, I think if board member thoughts, but if your plan is updated to only show one parking space on that right side, and it's a pull in and pull out, and we can confirm the curb cut, the size and the shape of the curb cut, that it's not going into your neighbor's driveway to get to your portion of the pavement, but the curb cut is wide enough that you can drive into yours. Those, I guess for me, those two pieces seem like just clarifying components to the application. So I since we're in deliberation or in discussion of application completeness, I think those two items, for me, have been addressed. I think they need clarity and need some work, but I guess I think that's how I see it, I guess, right this moment. But, Jeff?
I support that thought process as well. I mean, she has options, she has parking. She prefers one side, we want clarity. She can provide it. She has the other side, and she can get definition. So the options are there. We could find it complete, and she can solidify that plan before she comes back to us. And I think for clarity for me, if there are to be lights added to the right side of the building, just this fixture spec sheet and the mounting height will all be on there, so we'll know exactly how far the projection will be. I think that's all we really need for any sort of photometric. It's going to be a single fixture, possibly one on the side, one on the front. If you go on the driveway side, it looks like you already have a area light that's over the staircase that would do the majority of your path that would be constructed.
Yep.
And then you might, I think building codes might require one by the door, so you would have both areas, I think, covered at that point. But I agree, Mr. Chair, if I could find it complete, provided we need more clarification on those two items before final decision. Thank you.
Any other board member thoughts? So we still have a motion that's been made and seconded for finding this application complete. Any additional discussion? All right, those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. So, Shannon, can you work with the applicant, and does that make sense what we're saying
Definitely.
there?
Yeah,
Okay.
I appreciate it.
I think you understand what we're getting at as well.
Yes, I can help Ramuna pull together the information that you guys are looking for.
Okay, great. And then, so with that, do we have, I guess, do we need to schedule the next meeting on this one, Shannon?
Yes, so our recommendation as staff is to schedule the public hearing for the October 15th meeting. We have noticed it for that date.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, do we need a motion to approve that? We do, okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, then I'll move that we schedule a public hearing in this matter for October 15th.
I'll second that.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Jeff. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, with that, we have two more items, both of which are application of completeness. We have reached our 9 p.m. time frame here. If board members are in support, perhaps a motion to continue and address these remaining two items, if the board feels up for it.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Continue until we finish these last two items.
I second. They've sat here all night.
All right, motion to continue our meeting and address the two remaining items on the agenda. Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. All right, our next item on the agenda this evening is item 6H, This is for Big Buck Lane. This is a family child care center, and this is an application of completeness review for conditional use for a child care facility small in the West Residential Zoning District. Shannon?
Yes, thank you. So the applicant, Pam CV, is looking to reestablish a child care facility small at her property located at 4 Big Buck Lane. Back when this property was built in, I believe it was 1996, her and her husband purposely designed it so that they could have a child care facility in the basement of this property. That being said, one of the notes from our city engineer was in regards to the septic system. I was able to confirm with the code enforcement department today that the septic system was over-designed on purpose with the intention of a child care facility being at this location. So approximately 1,400 square feet of the existing structure will be converted for this use. There will be one employee at the child care facility small, and that will be Pam. And the maximum amount of children that will be served by this establishment will be 8. And those children will be between the ages of 6 weeks and 5 weeks, 6 weeks and 5 years old. So many may not be potty trained yet. So part of the water uses may be related to laundry, cleanup, things like that. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Board members, any questions for Shannon at this moment? All right, and we have the applicant with us this evening.
Hello. Hi, I'm Pamela Seavey.
Anything else to add? Sorry, I know.
No, just any questions you guys might have so that you can get home. And thank you for staying.
All right, great, thank you. Board members, any questions at this moment?
I think so. I noticed that there's already a fence on the property, so that's always one of our big concerns with childcare. I realize you're not right on a main road, but still, kids are quick.
It's mandated by the state of Maine to have a license. To have a licensed daycare facility, you have to have a fenced-in yard.
So you're already prepared for this.
Yes.
Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I noticed that I think the fire department's review had questioned the entrance through the garage door. You have a personnel door in the garage that they must go through to get into the space that will be the daycare center.
Yes.
Is that intended to be the primary use? So you won't have a pathway around the back of your house? Guests will pull up, or clients will pull up in the driveway, drop their children off, and exit, correct? So no walking around the building, it's all through the garage.
Correct.
And this use was there before, and you chose to cease it in 2001, something like that?
About 2007.
Okay. Those were the only questions that I had, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from board members, thoughts?
Mr. Chair, I've reviewed this, and any of the questions I've had have been answered either by Shannon or by the questions that have been asked here. So it looks like a very detailed application. I would move that we determine the application complete.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Jeff. Any additional discussion? All right, those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I will vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to find the application complete.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, go ahead, Jeff.
Mr. Chair, I move to schedule the public hearing for the application at 4 Big Buck Lane for a childcare facility for October 15th. And public hearing.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Jeff, and the second, Jim. Motion made and seconded to schedule public hearing and application review for October 15th. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm not sure if Shannon was involved, but whoever generated some of these site programs, even though they're very simple, they're very clear. And so if you have access to whoever did that, maybe they have a side business or, but those sorts of details make it much easier to review some of these
Maybe it's
applications.
Jason and Pam.
Yeah, that was Pam's husband.
All right, continuing, our next item on the agenda this evening is item 6I. This is 134 Flag Pond Road, map 76, lot 12-12-1. This is a application of completeness review and conditional use for a home occupation of a dog grooming studio. This would be a single employee dog grooming business in an existing garage. Anything to add?
Yes, thank you. So for the property at 134 Flag Pond Road, there are 2 driveways onto this property. One goes directly to the primary residence and the attached garage, and the other is a shared driveway that goes to the proposed detached garage that is going to be converted to the dog grooming business, and also an existing business, which I believe is Seacoast Motors. So I think that's important to know. The other thing that's important to know is that the entirety of the detached garage is not being converted to the dog grooming use. Only a portion of it is. So the detached garage is roughly 1,456 square feet. Only 588 square feet is going to be converted for the proposed use. The rest of the remaining garage will remain storage for the residential property. Elena will be the one and only employee at this dog grooming business. The dog grooming business has its own separate parking area. No exterior changes minus the installation of signage will be happening on site. And the dog grooming studio will be served by its own septic system that was submitted with the application materials. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Jeff?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. Shannon, I had a question because Exhibit B, page 21 of our packet of the application materials, you touched on it, but I had a question in my notes that it's kind of broken up. The dog grooming is proposed to be in the middle, residential storage on one end, and then residential use on the other. And my understanding is that existing building is currently a detached garage. So are they doing a combined use where they're finishing it to dog grooming and then making an additional residential unit in the same space? Or is that supposed to be labeled residential storage in this?
That's a good question. So a number of our employee reviewers also asked the same thing. there isn't an additional housing unit that's going in. So what's happening is on one side it's storage, and I believe on the other side there's space for the parking of a vehicle. And the middle of it is just going to be the dog grooming business. But both of the remaining residential use portions will not be for anything other than the use of the family that's already on the property. So it's not going to be converted to a dwelling unit.
So it's not going to be converted to a dwelling unit, but there's a new septic system going in for the dog grooming business?
Yes, because of the washing of the dogs that has to occur.
Thank you.
And Shannon, the septic system is independent from the residential use. You said that, right?
Yes, it will be independent of the septic system that is currently serving the residential home on the property.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Shannon? Did I say Emily? Okay.
I think you got my name right.
Okay.
You're all good.
It's late. All right, with that, we have the applicant with us. If you'd like to add anything additional.
Well, it's the plan. My name is Elena, I'm the applicant. So the plan is to have a low volume salon, one-on-one, by appointment only. The operation hours are not to be outside of 8 to 5 hours and not to exceed 5 grooms a day. So one at a time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Elena?
Mr. Chair, the application seems quite detailed, and again, some of the comments Jeff made on the last application, it seems to cover all the bases with parking and use of the building with septic. Seems to me it's complete, so I'll move that we determine the application complete.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
I will second.
Thank you for the second, Jeff. Any additional discussion on finding the application complete? All right, those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to find the application complete. Shannon, is this in another application that we can bring before the board for public hearing on October 15th?
Yes, it is. It's already been noticed.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll move to schedule a public hearing for October 15th and to also continue this matter in its entirety to that date.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Jeff. Any additional discussion on the motion to schedule a public hearing and continued application review to October 15th? All right, those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Great, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, and with that, quickly here, Shannon, you're sitting at the desk, so you get to answer the questions. Are there any general correspondences?
As far as I know, there have been no general correspondences.
All
for now.
right, and any department updates or any discussions?
Yes. I'm going to hand this over to Emily.
So we can present this in a more formal way at the next meeting, because it is a little late today, but we did provide the council a zoning amendments workshop last week, and we went over several items that we're going to be looking to bring forward through this board as well as the long-range planning committee. And so we'll like I said, package that up and give it to you, but you can take a look at the workshop presentation from the September 23rd meeting if you go into the council agenda for that night. So it might be worth taking a look at, and like I said, we'll give you the same presentation, probably put that on the next meeting or the meeting after. As far as some things that we're looking at universal design standards. We've been asked to look at the definition of neighborhood, looking at conservation cluster subdivision ordinance. There's a lot of things that are going on that are really could be very positive. So we're looking forward to getting that all back to you. And just want to make sure that we include the long-range planning committee because they are going to be an important piece of this as well. And then as far as the land use workshops that we're going to be doing with this group, we'll bring forward a list of when we're going to do those and what will be addressed in which format. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Emily. And with that, any planning board comments? No? All right, and with that, 9:35 p.m., we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.